Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Runaway Train Sports Podcast. I know it has been quite a few days since our previous episode, but we didn't end up recording one last week because with the cancellation of the Wisconsin game, it kind of lost all of its luster, and so we figured it'd be better just to wait and, record this when we know we have a game going on this weekend against Northwestern. I'm your host, Dakota. I will be taking you on a magical journey of the past couple of weeks and then giving a brief look ahead towards the Northwestern game this weekend, the big Northwestern game this weekend, and well as kind of touch on some basketball stuff that has been happening. We recently had National Signing Day, and so Purdue signed their two players in the 2020 class, as well as some updates on some other key players that have some developing news, as well as some scrimmage results that we can kind of talk about briefly, but we'll get to that towards the end. In this first part, we're going to talk about football as we are in the throes of football season. So let us take a look. We'll take a brief look back at the Illinois game from, at this point, almost 2 weeks ago. We won't go into it too much detail because it is a bit of old hat, and we do have a big game against Northwestern coming up this weekend. But the Illinois game, Purdue ended up coming out on top 31-24. It was a bit of an up and down day, at least in terms of the offense and the defense. I think the game started out pretty well for Purdue. There was a couple of untimely turnovers, one of which was definitely not a turnover, being Xander Horvath's first fumble. Purdue ended up leading the game 31-10 in the third quarter, towards the end of the third quarter. But Illinois kind of started to mount a bit of a comeback on the back of some of those mistakes. This was an interesting one to see kind of start to slip away, because you start to see some of the cracks that have kind of always been there when it comes to Jeff Brom-led Purdue teams. And it's playing with a lead and playing to he seems to always be trying to find a balance between going 1,000 miles an hour all the time, as well as trying to find ways to run the ball, move clock, slow the game down on that end. So it seemed like he was attempting to kind of 5D chess himself, and there was a particular series in the fourth quarter, late in the fourth quarter, where when all we needed to do is, burn some clock, force Illinois to use some timeouts, we threw the ball three consecutive plays, and 3 incomplete passes, 3 and out, no time comes off the clock, and Illinois gets the ball back. And I believe they scored. If on that one, I should have written down some notes, but here we are. We can't always get what we want. But it was an interesting day in terms of play calling. David Bell once again has a monster game, going over 120 yards and 1 touchdown. Probably should have been another one. I think on one of the plays early. Well, no, that's not true. I was going to say the one where one of the plays in the first half where it felt like it should have been a free play, and Aiden O'Connell kind of tossed one up, and he just jumped out in front of a defender and kind of fell short about at the half-yard line. I remember seeing that in review immediately after saying that it was a good call. He was short, but it was a great play to try and get there to begin with. But yeah, David Bell comes out and absolutely saves us. He actually ices the game with the final catch of the day. When Purdue was backed up pretty deep onto their own end zone with only a couple minutes left. You can't run the ball there. I think it was 3rd and 11. Aiden O'Connell just tosses one up towards David Bell, and he comes down with a one-handed catch and a first down, which ices the game from there. So we are lucky to have him. He's a god amongst men, yada yada. We all know this already. Xander Horvath also has a bit of an up and down day, credited with 2 fumbles, but as I mentioned, his first fumble was definitely not a fumble. Because he was literally on all fours when the ball was ripped away. But when the refs make that decision, it gets put in the stat book as a fumble. His other one was definitely much worse, as I think he fumbled it at about the 4-yard line, and it rolled to the 1 before it was recovered by Illinois. It was one of those fumbles that's extremely frustrating, especially coming off of being credited for 1 already. You want him to put 2 hands on the ball and just kind of use his size to get in. There was a defensive touchdown in this one, which was very exciting. I think it was Jalen Graham and who was the other one? Jalen Graham and I'm forgetting his name. The two guys from Detroit. I'm going to remember it later. It was Jalen Graham and someone else who teamed up, one hit the fourth string Illinois quarterback, Karan Taylor, pretty hard. He cost the ball up, and I think it was Jalen Graham that fell on it in the end zone for a touchdown. So I was coming right off the heels of a failed 4th and goal conversion, which was also very frustrating, where I think a lot of people agreed that you kind of just take the points there. But hey, a defensive touchdown is always fun as well. But yeah, all in all, I think that's really it. Aiden O'Connell had a good day. Xander Horvath, I mentioned, went over 100 yards. David Bell, also a god. Mershawn Rice continues to impress a lot. He got over the defense on his lone touchdown score of the day on a deep ball from O'Connell. So he has continued to shown that he is definitely going to step up in the absence of Rondell Moore when it comes to, someone else needs to step up. So that was also very nice to see. But Purdue ends up doing enough, getting enough stops, and getting enough first downs to come on top of this one by 7. So that moves us ahead to what potentially would have been the Wisconsin game. We heard early on in the week that, an announcement and an update was going to be given at about on Tuesday, that previous Tuesday. And it came out pretty early on Tuesday that there was absolutely no way that this game was being played. Wisconsin was still dealing with a lot of COVID issues, and so it became pretty clear that they were not going to be able to play, and the game was officially canceled fairly early in the process. No real drama about it. The only drama being that Wisconsin seems to still not be able to have their stuff together. It does look like it's getting better, but at least in terms of a few weeks to begin the season, they were really struggling to take care of their own business. So Purdue avoids Wisconsin and essentially gets a bye week going into the Northwestern game, which has since become probably one of the bigger games in the Big Ten West this season. Northwestern, who did play last weekend, took on the Nebraska Cornhuskers and ended up beating them at home, I think, by 8. I think it was like 21-13. One of those typical, Northwestern scores that I feel like we've all gotten used to. So they wanted to move to 3-0. Purdue also sits at 2-0. Wisconsin also is in the undefeated club, but they have only played one game. And the way that their program is currently looking, if they have another small outbreak of COVID, I don't think they're going to get to play another game. So this undefeated matchup between Purdue and Northwestern will effectively put one team in the absolute driver's seat in terms of winning the Big Ten West. The game was originally slated for the Saturday night BTN slot, so they would have kicked off at 7:30, but I think that it was since come out that the Maryland OSU game was canceled, so our game was moved to 5 o'clock Eastern. So it's a bit of an interesting Saturday schedule. At least in terms of on the Big Ten Network, because there's only now going to be 2 games on the day, and the OSU Maryland game was the 3:30 slot, so it was the middle slot. So their slate now goes, Illinois at Rutgers and then Northwestern at Purdue, and with obviously the Illinois Rutgers game being the noon game and then the Northwestern Purdue game being the night game. I think the predominant rumor is that they just didn't want to have to fill, 4 hours of airtime in between games. So the Illinois-Rutgers game has since moved to 1 o'clock, and the Purdue-Northwestern game has shifted down to a 5 p.m. kick. I think that it makes sense. I think when you look at it that way, it definitely it makes sense. I can't imagine trying to fill 4 hours of screen time with no games going on. And I think you can only talk about Illinois Rutgers as much as you can with nothing else really going on. You could potentially get a look in at other games going on, and if you can move those games a little closer together, I think that's probably the best thing that could have happened for them. So taking a look at Northwestern a little more deeply, this year has been night and day different than last year. Last year they were a bit of on a struggle bus when it comes to offense. This year still hasn't been that much better on offense, but they have done enough. I think the big improvement with Northwestern is definitely the defense. They're usually pretty stout defense, but I think last year they struggled from But the offense struggling as much, kind of similar to how Purdue teams have in the past, where the offense struggles so much that the defense has to be on the field so often that they kind of just get worn down by the end of the game. And so now it seems like they've had an offense to pair with their stout defense that at least can give them enough of a break to get some rest in. So looking at the offense, I think the biggest change is definitely the grad transfer Peyton Ramsey, who transferred to Northwestern from Indiana after Michael Penix Jr. wins the starting spot over there. We'll cover the IU team when we get there, but they are looking very good so far, and getting a little nervous about that one, I'll say the least. So Peyton Ramsey steps in, wins the starting job at Northwestern as they continue to have some struggling guys at the quarterback position. Not all of their faults. There's definitely some outside influences happening with some of them. But Peyton Ramsey steps in as the presumptive starter and officially named the starter. He, does a good job with what they ask him to do, but Northwestern is a run-heavy team to begin with, as they kind of always have been. This fact that they are a more run-heavy team definitely doesn't bode particularly well, as Purdue has routinely not been that great of a rushing defensive team, as we've seen in the past. In the Iowa game, I would point back to, but that was a weird game where they were asking Petrus to throw all over the field. And the times that they did consistently lean on the run, they were getting some pretty solid yards. So this one is going to be one to watch, and Purdue's defense is definitely going to have to be ready to stop the run in this one, or else it could be a lot closer or a lot uglier than a lot of us are comfortable with. So let's see. In the passing game, as I mentioned, they're a run-first team. So Peyton Ramsey actually only has about just over 500 yards passing across their 3 games. They only have one receiver who has over 100 yards receiving on the year. So this is one of those, definitely run to set up the pass. And even then, they're not taking any major shots. They're definitely doing just enough to move the ball and control the game as much as possible. So Purdue's defense is definitely going to have to come ready to take away what Northwestern wants to do. And so far this year, when it comes to stopping teams running the ball, it hasn't been the brightest spot on the defense. But we can take a look at a more happy side of the ball with the offense. The Northwestern defense, as I mentioned, is pretty good this year. They're only allowing 12 points per game, but that is probably bolstered a bit by the Maryland game in week 1, where they only allowed 3 points to a pretty struggling Maryland offense, which has soon apparently taken off since then. But they hold Maryland to 3, Iowa to 20, and then Nebraska to 13. So apparently that 12 points per game is good for 7th in the country. So it's a pretty good defense. Now the offenses that they're facing aren't necessarily up to the snuff of Purdue's, or the level of Purdue's. Maryland had apparently an outlier of a game, in a sense, taken off to a bit of an offensive juggernaut, it seems, in their most recent games. Nebraska has struggled on offense mightily with many, many question marks, and Iowa, in terms of at least the first 2 weeks, was really, really struggling to figure out what they wanted to do and how to do it. Even in their beatdown of Michigan State this past weekend, Petrus still had a lot of question marks when it comes to throwing the ball. So when it comes to playing from behind, these teams that they're playing didn't seem very well equipped to handle this Northwestern defense. So I believe this Purdue offense is going to give Northwestern their biggest challenge so far of the year. And I think David Bell, Milton Wright, and those two are definitely going to have good days. I think having those guys on the outside definitely will open things up on the inside for Xander Horvath to do just enough to provide some balance. Who knows what's happening with Rondale Moore? I have long since held the theory that he has just been holding out. Whether if he has been injured, then he has just been kind of taking a little extra time to come back. And my assumption was that he would play in the first big game of the year that would have a lot more eyes on it, which would have a lot more, meaning, and not playing on the road at Illinois, to say that. So in theory, if that is the case, we should see him this weekend. We have heard almost nothing on it this week, which not sure if that's more of a product of reporters not asking as many questions or this coaching staff just tightening the lip even more. If he does play, I think that sets us up extremely, extremely well, obviously, to give this offense a chance to have a lot of success, because as we've been saying for weeks and months, having David Bell and Rondale Moore on the field at the same time, it will be game over for most Big Ten defenses. Add in Milton Wright, add in all of these other receivers that would then immediately find themselves with 10 yards of open space, and you could have a fun offensive day. Not only that, but Xander Horvath should also have a lot more freedom on the inside if Jeff Brom does what he does best and schemes the offense around Rondale Moore. So even without Rondale Moore, I think we'll be able to move the ball pretty steadily. I think what is going to come down to is, can Northwestern's defense get enough stops? Can they force any turnovers? But I think in the end, it's going to be more of a case of, can they stop the run, force Purdue to pass 100% of the time? But even then, Purdue kind of almost wants to do that anyway. And so I think it's going to come down to how they can scheme around this Purdue offense. But taking a look at the game kind of more as a whole now, I think it looks fairly even. I think Purdue has struggled to get going so far this year, while Northwestern seems to have picked up from the go. So I think this is going to be one of the best challenges that either team has faced so far. Obviously, Purdue's game against Iowa in week 1 was a very good test for this new team, but that Iowa offense was struggling kind of a lot, and as well, week 1 you can't really take too many. I don't feel like you can really draw too many conclusions from a week 1 game. You can look at Michigan for that, and we'll kind of take a look around the Big Ten here briefly after we get through with Northwestern. But this is going to be a big challenge, and I'm hoping our guys are up to it. I like that this one is in Ross-Ade. Obviously, without fans, it kind of does take some of it away. But even then, playing in your home stadium definitely will carry a bit of weight, and I'm hoping our guys will be able to take advantage of that. Northwestern's defense is better than it was last year, but their offense is still kind of the Northwestern offense you kind of expect to see. And so I think, honestly, it's going to come down to the defensive side of the ball. Whichever side can create turnovers, create the havoc necessary. If Purdue can stop the Northwestern run, I think that really, really bodes well for Purdue. I'm not worried about Purdue's offense. I am entirely worried about their defense being able to stop the run and get stops when Northwestern has the ball. Northwestern is going to try and run the ball a lot. They're going to try and have control possessions, control the clock, and really control the pace of the game the entire day. And Purdue is going to have to find ways to get over that. So in this one, I like Purdue, and I do like Purdue in this one. I like that it's in Ross-Ade. I think that our guys will be ready to play with the extra bye week, the unexpected bye week that we did have. I think that is going to only help Purdue. Obviously, Purdue gets the benefit of an extra week off. I can't believe I forgot to mention this. George Karlaftis' status is still kind of up in the air. This season, for whatever reason, the coaching staff has been extremely tight-lipped when it comes to player statuses, so we aren't sure quite where he is at yet, and so we aren't sure if he will get to play this weekend. The fact that we haven't heard much about it makes me lean towards not, and to start kind of preparing yourself mentally to, potentially not see big number 5 out there for this week, which would be tough. But this defense, I think, was going to have its challenges with or without him. So they know what they're doing on their side. And so, it's going to be what it's going to be. Hopefully he's out there. Hopefully it isn't as bad. But if absolutely necessary, sit him, get him healthy and ready for the rest of the year. And, these guys are going to come out and fight for him regardless. So I like Purdue in this one. I'm not going to give an official score prediction because, man, those are really hard to do. I'll just say that I think Purdue wins a potentially close game because besides the Maryland game, Northwestern seems to only play close games. And so I think Purdue wins a moderately okay scoring affair. I think Northwestern's probably going to be able to move the ball. So I'll say it's probably be a close game, similar to Illinois, plus or minus a few points on either side. So take of that what you will. And so that's kind of what I think is going to happen in that one. But now we can talk about a fun aspect of this Northwestern game that isn't directly impactful of the performance on the field. Purdue announced on Wednesday that they would be wearing throwback uniforms. We are about this. Throwback uniforms to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the 2000 team that won the Big Ten and went to the Rose Bowl. So we are wearing some throwback gold uniforms with the old, black P on the helmet, white stripe down the middle. Got the colors going on in the shoulders. It is clean, and if you have not seen their tweet, you should go find Purdue Football's Twitter. They have it all over that. It is sharp. They are going to look fresh, and I hope they have a lot of fun playing in them because I think it's going to be a lot of fun. They were, these are the uniforms that Purdue was wearing back when they were competing for the Big Ten titles, and I think hopefully, forehead. I think this could be, the athletic department saying, hey, we're ready to compete for Big Ten championships again. And it starts with this game in particular when, whoever wins this game, like I said, is going to take hold of the Big Ten West. So that is very fun. If you haven't seen the uniforms, you should definitely go and check them out. They are a lot of fun. But now we're going to take a quick break, and then we will come back and talk briefly about basketball, and then we'll wrap this thing up and get you guys going on. Welcome back. And we are going to be shifting focus now towards Purdue basketball, which is amazingly enough coming at a warp pace. It seems only like yesterday where the Big Ten tournament was being canceled in front of our eyes, as well as the NCAA tournament. Granted, we don't care about that one as much based on the results of last year. But Purdue basketball is coming fast and is coming quickly. And so I figured we'd take a brief moment here to, wind down this podcast talking about what's going on, kind of the last couple of days/weeks of what's been going on around the program. And we have some things that have developed since. Purdue had a scrimmage a couple of days ago that some things came out from. The big one that is definitely going to, I think, have the biggest impact on this team is that Eric Hunter Jr. Is expected to be out for 6 to 8 weeks after he suffered a broken tibia during this scrimmage. It is tough when a guy like that goes down like that. So we are going to be seeing a lot of the younger guys, I think, a lot quicker and a lot sooner than we originally thought. With Eric Hunter being out, unfortunately. But it also doesn't stop there because it has come out that Ethan Morton has been out for a bit of time with mono, as well as Emmanuel Ndogwuona has also not been practicing at the same time. So there's been a handful of guys that aren't practicing due to illness or injury. So hopefully those guys can come back stronger and quicker. Obviously, Eric Hunter is going to be out for quite a bit of time. So hopefully he comes back okay. So the rest of this scrimmage, as I mentioned, Ethan Morton is still out. Apparently he's expected to come back in a week or so. He did come out. I'm reading Mike Carmen's summary and tweets. Zach Edey and Trevion Williams both played together on the same team in one of the scrimmage segments. So I think that could be a lot of fun when you have a 7'4" Zach Edey and a bully of a man and Trevion Williams playing together at the same time. I'm curious to see how that would have looked in person, but who knows? I think it adds a bit of fun that we could see with another different Twin Towers scenario, but definitely a bully ball scenario to say the least. Apparently Jaden Ivey also played a lot of point and looked really, really good, according to Mike Carmen. And apparently Painter said that it was his best day so far. So if what we got to see, at least Mike got to see in terms of the scrimmage, and saying he looked really good, even if it is his best day, I think that bodes pretty well considering where he is at as of right now. But I think this is setting up to be a pretty fun and interesting season. It's already come out that no fans are going to be allowed in Mackey during the season. So I think Purdue is definitely going to suffer in terms of that, because obviously Mackey Arena loses the fans, loses the home court advantage that we usually typically see when other teams come into Mackey Arena. So hopefully the team is able to pick up the energy for themselves and is able to, handle themselves from there. Trevion Williams was named to a couple of watch lists, primarily the preseason All Big Ten team, as well as the I can't remember the award for best center in the nation. So hopefully he's definitely slated to compete for that. He's definitely going to have to be the bedrock of this team this year, especially if some of these injuries aren't, figured out sooner rather than later. Also with the Emmanuel Dowuona news that he has not been practicing and they're not quite sure exactly what's going on. This could mean that Zach Edey also sees a lot of time early. But fear not, because from what we've seen, he has actually been performing quite a bit above where many thought he would be at this point, considering he's only been playing ball for a few years. So I think that also could be very exciting. Obviously, there's no one on Purdue's team that can really match him size-wise, so that could contribute to some of the things that we've been seeing on Twitter in terms of his performance. But again, that sentiment goes two ways, because I don't think there are very many teams out there that will have the physicality and personnel to match up with him anyway. So I think his current status and level could be a definite win for Purdue if he comes in a bit more along than we originally thought, especially with Dowuona out right now. I think he could provide some of that key backup minute role if Trevion were to ever get in foul trouble or ever need a quick break. So I think that is also going to be something to watch out for. And just, man, there's so many new guys. I'm going down the list in my head, and there's just so many new guys that are coming out, whether it be Mason Gillis or Brandon Newman from last year, who redshirted, who we're all very excited for, or Jaden Ivey, who we're all very excited for, and Ethan Morton, who I personally am extremely excited for. And Edey's news has come out, and that's kind of made me a little more into the idea of seeing him a little earlier. I think he was pretty destined for a red shirt this year, for better or for worse. But if he is further along, and if Emmanuel is still dealing with some health things, I think, hey, if he can play, he can play. But this is going to be an extremely fun team. I think it's going to be hopefully a bit night and day different than last year. The loss of Eric Hunter Jr. definitely hurts. But once he comes back, hopefully this team can kind of, continue on from there. But not only do we have new guys for this team, but as of this recording, yesterday was National Signing Day for basketball, and Purdue signed their 2021 to 2021 recruits. As of right now, Trey Kaufman and Caleb First both signed yesterday, marking Purdue's current two-man 2021 class. Painter has said that he's willing to oversign if the right player comes along, so I think that'll be something to keep an eye on. But as of right now, this is our two-man class, and boy, what a class is it! We'll start with first because he committed a while ago and was the first to officially commit to this class. First is going to be one of the highest rated recruits Matt Painter has ever signed. First will be able to play power forward or center. Kind of think of Trevion Williams but I think First does fit more of a forward role than a center role, but he definitely could play a small ball center should we need the lineup. He was rated as the number 31 player in the 2021 class, as well as whoever, depending on who you asked, he was either number 1 or number 2 in the state of Indiana. And we'll get to the other guy who was fighting him for the number 1 spot in a second. But in high school, as a junior, he averaged 22 points a game, 13.5 rebounds, 4 assists. Dude filled it up, and I think everyone is extremely, extremely excited to see what he can do in the black and gold. And as I mentioned, fighting him for that number one spot in the state of Indiana, we have Purdue's other signee, Trey Kaufman, who joins first sort of in that power forward, small forward kind of area. Trey Kaufman was ranked number 40 in the nation. It was given the 2020 Indiana Gatorade Player of the Year. So depending on who you ask, either Kaufman was number one in the state or First was number one in the state. But we definitely got, at minimum, the top two guys in the state of Indiana, which is always extremely exciting. It seems like Kaufman and First would have some overlap in the positions they play, but obviously they see enough of, or Matt Painter has sold them enough to come in and be in the same class, both being, that 6'9", 6'10" size and playing nearly the same position. They believe that they have, different enough skill sets to be able to potentially even play at the same time, which would be very fun to see. But, Kaufman's recruiting, the announcement came even more recently, only a few weeks ago, where he announced on his local, I believe it was his school broadcasting channel, with one of his, lifetime friends interviewing him, which was very exciting. If you haven't seen that, I know it's out on YouTube. It was very well done. It was very fun. But he ended up choosing Purdue over the likes of Indiana, Virginia, North Carolina, and I believe he had Indiana State on his list as well. So West Lafayette gets another good one where, this guy also just fills it up as a junior. In high school, he averaged almost 26 points a game, almost 10 rebounds a game, and about 3 assists per game as well. So Purdue is getting some absolute dogs in the coming years, and the future is absolutely bright for this program. Purdue opens their season, real soon, only a few weeks away. I'm going to try and see if I can pull up their, we do know. We don't have the complete schedule yet, but we do know a couple of the early games. Pardon me. Let me pull it up real quick. Let me see if ESPN has anything going on about it. So let's see. Yeah, this year is going to be really interesting due to the lack of fans. It'll be really weird watching, them play in Mackey, but, be very, very, very quiet. Obviously without fans. Okay, let's see. So they only have a handful of games currently scheduled. Their first game that is scheduled will come November 25th against Liberty. And I believe their preseason exempt tournament, which I'm forgetting the name of, the Space Coast Classic, that's what it is. So their first scheduled game is 11/25. I don't know if we'll see anything before that. The other games that are currently scheduled, they have a December 4th game against Valparaiso. On the December 8th, they go to Miami, part of the Big Ten ACC Challenge. On December 12th, they will host Indiana State. And then on the 19th, they're scheduled to play Notre Dame in the Crossroads Classic. The Big Ten has not come out with the conference schedule yet, but we should be expecting that over the next week or so, at least from what we've been hearing. So hopefully that comes out and we'll be able to cover that a bit when we get there. But basketball season's coming around the corner. I know all of us are ready to wipe last season out of our memories and kind of get back to competing for Big Ten championships like we have been in the last few years. I think this team is definitely setting up to, if they can play up to the level that these coaches and these players are expecting. I think even in a deep Big Ten like this year, we'll be at least minimum top half. And over the next couple of years, we can expect to be back right there near the top. So it is a very, very exciting time to be in West Lafayette, both for football and basketball. But I think there we will wrap this up for today. I thank you all for joining me for this episode of the Runaway Train Sports Podcast. You can expect to find, recaps from this weekend's football games, as well as Purdue's matchup against Northwestern on BoilerInTexas.com, as well as this podcast coming again next week, coming to you with the results of that Northwestern game and any other news that comes up in the course of the next week. But for now, I hope you all have a great week ahead. I hope you all have fun watching Purdue take on Northwestern this weekend. And as always, boiler up, hammer down, hail Purdue.